So we'll start off today on the Purchasing tab. Purchasing tab lets us set a default vendor. If you notice, wherever there's an eye in a circle, that means you can zoom in to get more detail about that particular item. In this case, you can drill down into the vendor. Purchase code is a free-form field. The next standard cost and the last standard cost are stored here with their dates. The buyer, product manager, end of life are all pretty straightforward. The freight add code, what this is for is when you receive something, you can capitalize your freight. There are two ways of handling freight. You can either capitalize it or expense it. When you expense it, your inbound freight just gets charged to a freight account in the general ledger, and it shows up as a cost of sale expense. If you capitalize it, that means you're including the freight in the cost of the goods. If you buy something for $100 and it costs you $10 in freight to bring it in-house, your choice is to store it or keep it in your inventory at $100 cost and expense the freight, or $110 cost, and that's called capitalizing the freight. What you charge to freight capitalization during receiving can be set here. You can say, I want to add freight for this item either as a dollar amount or a percentage. And then here you put the add rate. So in this case, whenever something comes in, if you buy it for $100, it will add 10% of that as a freight cost and carry an inventory at $110. And then you'll have to handle the expensing of the AP invoice accordingly, and that's in a separate discussion. Over here on replenishment, we have a sole source flag. The sole source flag indicates, if checked, that this item is only available from the vendor that we have on screen here. The primary effect of this is that when you are doing vendor ships and an item is a sole source item, the system will not only create a requisition for that item to vendor ship it, but will also immediately create a purchase order because it knows that you can only buy the item from this one vendor. Purchasing lead days is how long it takes for you to get the goods after you've ordered it. And then some historical information, last PO, due date of the next PO, and last PO cost. We have additional specs. You can store the dimensions of the item, length, width, height, shipping weight, cubic size, and how many cartons this item comes in. For example, if you're shipping a desk, the desk may come in 3 cartons. So this tells the system when it's time to print address labels, it will print 3 address labels instead of 1. If you have small stuff, you can use a fractional number in the carton. For example, if 4 of a unit will fit into a normal packing box, you can have a carton size of 0.25, and that'll tell the system that it should print 1 address label for every 4 of the units sold. Then box size. Item tells you that you're using the dimensions of the item for the box. Default box size just means your house box. Then some standard boxes and miscellaneous box size will be prompted at shipping time. One of the things that you have to decide on a company-wide basis is whether the dimensions are the package dimensions or the raw dimensions of the unit. In most cases, the dimensions will be the package dimensions so that it can be used for freight rating. and you'll have to put the raw dimensions of the item into the extended description. The NMFC is the National Materials Freight Code. This indicates what freight code it is. For those who aren't up on freight codes, the freight code basically is an industry standard to tell you how dense something is. Because trucking companies, not package system companies like UPS and FedEx, but less than truckload, LTL, they will rate something based on the density, because in most cases, the trucks will run out of cubic space before they run out of weight. So something, and I don't know the freight codes by heart, but ping pong balls might be a freight code of 100 and bricks might be a freight code of 200. That tells the carrier that in the case of ping pong balls, you're shipping something that's extremely light and very voluminous. And in the case of bricks, you're shipping something that's very heavy and very compact, so they know how to rate you. Then the packing field lets you define packing stuff. Freight class is an extension of NMFC, and commodity code is also used with that. So those three fields are used when you're dealing with LTL trucking. Otherwise, with parcel stuff, you don't have to worry about it. Special attributes, you have a warn quantity, where if someone enters an order for a quantity higher than this, it will just warn the operator that they're entering a higher than usual quantity to make sure they haven't fumble fingered something. Agency type is a free form field. Currency surcharge, yes and no. This indicates whether or not the currency surcharge calculation should be used. Very rarely will you use this. And then a costing type lets you set that for costing calculations with custom code. Further down, you have temperature restrictions, minimum and maximum temperature, usually with perishable goods, wine, stuff like that. Then in the serialized manufacturing group, you have the serial flag, whether or not this is a serialized item. This flag can have three different, or actually four different values. It can be no, which indicates the item's not serialized, just straight pick and pack. It can say yes, which means it's a serialized item, and that item is received with serial numbers. So during receiving, it's going to prompt them for serial number entry. And when you ship it, it's going to prompt it for serial number entry. If it has a value of S, that means it's a serialize on sale. And that behavior is you receive it in bulk. You don't capture the serial numbers as they are received, but you capture the serial numbers as you sell them. And then the last flag is L, which indicates it's a lot tracked item versus serial tracking. Now, the serialized item flag you can only get to when you first set up the item. This is not something you can toggle after the item has been set up. Then for the manufacturing process, you can have a serial number counter here, and this is used when you manufacture this item in-house. You can have a manufacturer code that is stuck on the front of the serial number when the serial number is assigned. And then you have the current sales bomb revision, which tells you what sales bomb should be printed on sales orders. Down here in the bottom, we have the label set. For each item, you can have multiple additional descriptive information, and that descriptive information changes by item type. So if we look at, let's say, monitors, if we're shipping monitors or cataloging monitors, we may want to store a resolution, a type, a size, and a refresh rate. If we're dealing with hard drives, we're looking for a type, capacity, form factor. So this just lets you set the labels for the particular catalog item. If you use the special code auto, then it will set these labels based upon the item number, not based upon the set of labels. And these labels are stored as text data records, which we talked about in an earlier class. Moving on to the advanced tab, where we tend to dump all sorts of other stuff. An item tax number, if this item has a particular taxation number. A tax category for categorizations based upon the different states' taxation. A United Nations specification number, very rarely used. The default order entry attribute set. This is a little more interesting. The order entry attribute set is used to bring up a specific set of order entry attributes or a specific set of attributes tied to a sales order when this item is entered. And we'll go more into detail on that when we get to order entry, but this lets you set up a list of values that get prompted for example, data access for their runtime licenses. We'll put in an attribute set name here that then prompts them for user count, version, registration name, and stuff like that during order entry. Cell with set allows you to identify a set of items that the operator or the user on the website should be prompted for whenever they buy something. For example, you buy a refrigerator. Well, actually, refrigerator is a bad one. Let's say you buy a washing machine. Additional cell with maybe power cord, hose, extended warranty, box of soap, this type of stuff. Customer account restricts the sale of this item to a particular customer. If you have an item that's a custom item only available for one customer, you can put their account number in here. Buying group types, this allows you to say that this item is only available to certain buying groups. So you may have an item that's a custom item for multiple buying groups instead of one customer. And then export license tells you whether or not you need an export license for this. EDI export date. Whoops,
Hank, I have a question. I'm sorry to interrupt. I have a question on
no,
that.
please interrupt. You're not doing it often enough.
On that, the field where you wrote, where you said the customer account. So if it's an item specifically for a customer, you know, ABC distributors, what have you, you're saying you put that account number in there, and order entry would only be able to enter and this item for that customer. Any other customer they try, it would prompt them that they can't do it.
That's correct.
Wow. Okay, I did not know that. Thank you.
Actually, I'm not sure that it prompts them that they can't do it. I think it just doesn't show up on the searches. And if you key it in, it won't accept it.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'll try it and test. Thank you.
Now, there's another advanced system of this called PACS, Product Authorization Control System, which lets you do fancier stuff where you can put in geographical ship tos and stuff like that. For example, we had a customer where they're a distributor, but they could only sell certain products east of the Mississippi and stuff like that. So this is a simple way of assigning it to one customer or buying group. The PAC system lets you do fancier and more exotic stuff. Okay, EDI. The last time this item was exported for customer feeds, the time, the status, and the batch. What the code this list lets you do is assign multiple groups to an item. So in addition to product line, product group, and business line, you may have a different grouping, and you may want to have one item appear in multiple groups. Let's say, last time we used this was for auto parts, where the guys made bumpers or trailer hitches, and the trailer hitch, the same model trailer hitch, could be used with the Ford Explorer and the Chevy S10, the Colorado, the GMC Canyon. So it just allows you to another way of grouping stuff. Over on the right here, we've got country of origin, a class field. Class is often used in the special class pricing system. ABC codes are normally used for inventory counting. A market field for people to identify particular markets. A quality field, whether or not it requires registration, and how long the warranty it is. Then you've got these two numbers down here, the Universal Product Code and the Global Trade Item Number. These sort of are like the UN specification, and they're alternative numbering systems. Universal Product Line from UDEX, hardly anybody uses. The Global Trade Item Number is used by the people that purchase the UPC coding system. Are based in Switzerland, and they bought UPC and they bought EIN, and they assign the UPC numbers now. They are also pushing to assign numbers to locations and items. So what they want to do is have you register your item with a global trade item number so that anybody can order that item out of the International Global Trade Catalog. And it's a great way for them to make money, but I've yet to see anybody use it. But it's a requirement that you have that field in certain industries, so we put it there. Historical information, last received date, last count, what your count cycle is, first time you sold it. Comments. Again, we can have an unlimited number of comments. Comment lines 1 through 999 are free form, and then you can see there are list only, a comment that'll print on the invoice only, an order completion invoicing comment that comes up during invoicing order completion, a shop order comment, inventory purchasing, order confirmation, returns, order entry, and then some web comments that are used for building up the product description on the web, the title, the details, description, an image list, and a web page link. Now you also have, you notice up here in the imaging system, it's actually off of the catalog management list, you can specify images associated with this catalog. You have related items. Related items are very similar to the sell with. These are items that would appear on the bottom of the screen on the website, or can be looked at in order entry for selling with. Special pricing records for this item. You can see them and edit them here instead of having to go through the special pricing screen. And then our attributes, the DVD player attributes. Now, if you notice, you have model and you have item. If we go up here and we say this item has a model number. What that does is allows us to group descriptive and image information for very similar items together so that we don't have to enter them multiple times. An example of that would be a chair. The chair may come with a red, blue, green, yellow seat cushion. And the pictures of the chair and the descriptions of the chair are completely identical except for the color. So you can set those attributes up at the model level instead of at the item number level, so you don't have excess data or repetitive data entry. So that's our catalog detail. We'll look at the More menu. The More menu lets you look at a bill of materials for the item. It lets you look at the cross-reference table for the item. It lets you look at the qualified vendor list. The qualified vendor list is used in situations where you frequently have to track where the item came from and that the item was purchased from a vendor that has proper tracking. Aircraft parts, medical equipment, this type of stuff. The qualified vendor list tells purchasing that here are the only vendors that you can buy this item from. They're the only vendors that have been qualified. For example, if your company policy says we can only purchase from ISO 9000 or 9001 qualified vendors, then you could list them here for the item. For the item, you have the vendor, the manufacturer, 3 additional descriptions, which are the vendor's descriptions, the vendor's item numbers, a minimum order quantity from this vendor, the reorder quantity, and the minimum reorder quantity, lead days from this vendor, shipping weight, how many shipments you've gotten from this vendor, how many were late, type, class, and sales category for organizing these. You can store current, prior, and next list price, cost, and foreign currency costs. You can store statistics, notes, some advanced information about the item from this vendor, and some free-form codes. QVL is used in a very small percentage of situations, usually only medical equipment and aircraft parts. Then we have our safety stock for this item, who we keep safety stock for. We went over that already. Purchasing history for this item. We can drill down and see where we've bought it from, how many we bought when. Product label printing lets you print labels for the item using list and label forms. Then web info. This goes out for that item. For example, this particular item, the web info points to OFM. So you can put a link to the web information for that item, and then maintaining your attributes. So that's our catalog record. The catalog record says, here's a description of the item that we sell. We can then go down to the warehouse level and say, here are the warehouses that we stock this item at, or that this item number exists at. The location code, the item number, what we have on hand, reserved, allocated, on order, whether or not serialized, and the status, and whatever that last S is, where it's the stocking item. So this lets you see what you have in stock and where is it. Now you can drill down, and when you drill down, you get to the inventory record. The inventory record has similar data from the catalog record. the location, item number, the descriptions, whether it's active, behavior, and then here we deal with quantities. In the catalog, we don't deal with quantities because it's not where we stock stuff. So this tells us we have 49,703 on hand for this item. How many on order, reserved, total reserved, and allocated. Reserved is how many orders we have for this item that are within the scheduling window. Total reserved is how many we have orders for in total. And the quantity allocated means the quantity that we have assigned to specific sales orders. Our total safety stock, the worn quantity, unit of measure, last PO date, when the next PO is due in this location, when it's available in this location, last received, last receipt number. Then the first time we sold it from this location, the last time we sold it, the date it went inactive, the last time we consumed it. Consumption is updated by the manufacturing system versus sale. And last production is the last time you produced this item out of manufacturing versus bought it. Then bin information, the default bin for this item within this location. In this location, it can be in bin 1. In another location, it can be in bin 5. The default bulk bin, this is if you have an item that you store in a picking location and you store in a bulk area, you can have a bulk bin and then a fast pulling bin where some companies will have items that are very fast movers right next to the packing and invoicing station where they just don't have to walk to pick it. So it lets you have multiple bins for stuff. Now, the information in the inventory detail record is synchronized from the catalog detail based on some control information. And based upon the control information, the fields are shadowed or not shadowed. For example, here you see the description fields are disabled, whereas in the catalog, they're enabled. That means that the descriptions 1, 2, and 3 are synchronized down or normalized down from the catalog to the inventory item. If you had a warehouse in Mexico and a warehouse in Quebec, you may want to not synchronize them and then keep the descriptions in the appropriate language in the inventory record. One of the common things that's not synchronized is the kitting flag. OFM, for example, when they sell a kit, a chair, and armrests, it goes out as a kit, but when it comes back, it needs to come back not as a kit, but as a finished good. And then in the returns location, it gets exploded, and then the parts moved back into stock. So there are situations where you want all of the fields synchronized, and there's situations where you only want part of them synchronized. And where they're synchronized is in a text data record that lets you control the synchronization. Pricing, we've got pricing for this location if it's different from the catalog, and some historical information. The unit cost is the average weighed cost of the goods in this warehouse. Average weighed cost is calculated as follows. If you have one item in stock with a current average weighed cost of $50, and you receive another item, another unit of that item, and the price has gone up to $60 from $50, after the receiving process, you'll have 2 items in stock with an average weighed cost of $55. The last cost is the last cost you received it at, commission cost, next cost, standard cost, all the standard information that gets stored here. Details about the item. Again, these are things that can be synchronized or non-synchronized, whether or not you use the same default vendor for each location. The lead days, serial number, prefixes, assembly codes. And then replenishment and counting. Tells you what you have on hand, on reserved, on order again. Tells you what the lead days are, what your allocation window is. And this is specific for this location, not just for the whole item. The reorder point, minimum quantity you want of this item in this location, the maximum quantity, the economical order quantity, the minimum reorder quantity, and then your daily demand is a calculated number that you can refresh that calculates what your daily demand for this item in this location is. The end of month, these are updated by a job at the end of the month, and then your counting information. So this is the stuff that we store at the inventory warehouse level. We can also here drill down further and get to the bin level. This is a bin in the warehouse. And in the bin, we store the bin number, the location, the item number, the type of bin. If you have a complex system, you can identify bins as different types, and that's used for the put away process. You may have bins that are small parts bins. You may have bins that are pallet racks. You may have bins that are automated put away bins. The status of the bin, the unit of measure in the bin says, is this a pallet bin? Is the bin number the same as the location? And whether to delete the bin record when we've pulled the last goods out of the bin. The unique identifier for a bin record is bin number, item number. So some companies like to have the item numbers always in the same bins, in which case you don't delete when empty. If you have what's called the chaotic or random put away, then you delete the bin record when you no longer have anything in it, and it'll get recreated when you stock a bin somewhere. For each bin, we have the quantity in a bin, the quantity that have been committed to either pick lists or shop order picks, how many are free, the date when it was committed, the last quantity you stocked, the last quantity you pulled, and the dates and who did it. Again, a subtype of bin, the maximum quantity that can go in that bin, the maximum weight of this bin, and the location of where the bin is. Then we've got some count information for this bin, who counted it last, what the last quantity was, what the pre-count quantity was, and that's used for doing the adjustment. When you go out and count stuff, you'll compare it with the pre-count quantity to see if you have to make an adjustment. So that takes us through our 3 levels of catalog and inventory. We have any questions on this before we switch over to the next area? Okay, we can back out of here. And we can take a look here. There are a couple of more things on the catalog, more menu. You have keyword lookup. Keyword is very similar to full text search. The difference is full text search information is maintained by the SQL server automatically. The keyword information is maintained out of Stream and gives you a little different level of control. One of the things you can put into the keyword system is, let's say you have a headlight, and this headlight is usable in 10 or 12 different car models and different years, you can put that information in the keyword file, and then if you search for it, it'll bring you back the item that matches that. So it's an alternative to full text search. It was originally developed prior to full text search, so it may or may not be around long in the future. Okay, here we can edit the normalization configuration. This, if you're a sysop, you can do this. This tells us, or tells the system, which fields to skip during normalization. The default for normalization is to normalize the data from the catalog to the inventory record where the field names in the inventory match the catalog. And in here, we can put a list of field names that we want to skip. For example, we don't want to normalize the rev date, initials, entered by, entered on, reorder point, or any of these fields. Here we see assembly cost. This one, assembly code, sorry. This turns off the normalization. If you don't have normalization turned off, when you edit a catalog record, it automatically goes out and tries to update all of the inventory records for that item. Then we have the auto create location list, and this lets you maintain a list of locations to create the item in when you add a new item. That saves you the work labor of having to go in and create location records for an item. In most cases, you'll have all of your locations listed. However, in some cases, if you don't stock everything everywhere, you may want to manually create them to reduce your item count in the inventory file. So I think that covers us on the catalog. So looking at what's next. Next, let's look over on the vendor. Vendor management is picked up off of accounts payable, and it's pretty straightforward. You have a vendor account number, vendor company, an alternate account number. Let's pick a vendor. Whoop. Okay. An alternate account number, a name, a status, your customer account at that vendor, the buyer. The pay cycle is used for generating accounts payable runs. The pay class allows you to pick groups of invoices or vendors to pay. Language, a couple of phone numbers, a vendor type. Is it a expense vendor, inventory vendor, services vendor? When the vendor was set inactive, by who and why. Then the vendor address with mapping and validation, and then a remit to address if you send the check to some other place other than the vendor. Purchasing information, terms, credit limit, tax ID number, tax rate, tax type, how the vendor invoices you by EDI, whether you automatically pay the vendor or it requires a manual intervention, and whether you or not you get statements from this vendor. Then default PO information, ship via terms, whether or not you accept back orders or partials, what the lead days are from this vendor. The PO method you can use. Some people require written POs, some faxed. Currency, and then a default where you charge invoices from this vendor to. what GL account, the AP clerk, and the accounts payable control account that invoices entered for this vendor get charged to. Statistics for the vendor: purchases month to date, quarter to date, year to date, total, trend, what you currently have on order, last invoice, invoice amount, last payment from you, current balance, the balance date, pending, vendor accounts receivable, and RAs open. This RAs open means you've sent $30 worth of RAs to the vendor that you're waiting for credits for. Demographics: if the vendor is the manufacturer, co-op advertising amount, and some free-form fields: code, standard inventory classification, class, sex, size, minority, which are used for if you are required to do government reporting on how much you buy from women-owned companies or minority-owned companies. Some notes, the usual set of comments, and then vendor contacts. Vendor contacts are very similar to customer contacts, all the same fields. Site data: this is site-specific data. You can name these fields whatever you want. And an eCommerce access code. This is if you have the vendor eCommerce module, it will, the code that they use to get into it. Entity information, just like on the customer side, what type of entity it is, and a federal and state number. And then our attributes for adding whatever other information we need to the vendor. You can look at vendor invoices, the invoice history, and then you can do a couple of things off the vendor invoice lookup. You can pay the invoice, and that lets you identify that a payment's been made, whether or not it's a check or wire. You can apply credit memos. If you have a credit memo from a vendor, you can apply it to an open invoice, and you can assign an invoice. Assigning invoice is a very useful feature. Let's say, for example, a printer breaks and you send somebody out to Best Buy to pick up a printer, and they put it on their personal credit card. When they come back with the invoice is from Best Buy, so you really want to record that and scan it as a Best Buy invoice with the vendor being Best Buy. So when you enter the AP invoice, you'll click the Assign checkbox, and then as soon as you save the invoice to Best Buy, it'll pop up and say, who do you want to assign this to? And you'll then assign it to the person whose credit card was used, so that the accounts payable is to that person and not to Best Buy. This lets you record who the actual vendor was and who you owed the money for buying the product. Then you can look at inventory activity, which will be receipts for the vendor invoice, and you can select it if it's a situation where the invoice is going to be used for something. You can track payments to that to that vendor. You can track purchase orders, open and closed, and you can enter an accounts payable invoice. And we'll go through the accounts payable when we do the training on the accounts payable module. So that's our vendors. Then let's see what other static type of data we want to look at before we get into transactional data. Buying groups we looked at, cross-reference we looked at. Oh, while we're in the catalog, let's look at item number change. On a regular basis, companies will have item number changes. When you change an item number, you have the option of setting the item inactive and creating a new item. However, if you want all of the sales history and transactional activity to get changed also, you can use the item number change submission, where you select an item, and then you can put in a new item number and submit this, which puts it on a queue. And then at the end of the day, you would run the item number change processor, and that will go through all of the orders, invoices, inventory transactions, all that type of stuff, and change the item number everywhere. You also have the same option with customer names. Now, one of the things that we do optionally, and most people do, is every time an invoice is created, we create a PDF image of that invoice and store it in the imaging system associated with that invoice number. This allows you to look at an invoice in its original state, because if 6 months or a year after the invoice has been created, you change an item number, you change an item number description, you change the company name, you have to be able to produce a copy of the original invoice. Otherwise, the IRS can get cranky with you if a customer has an invoice that's different from the invoice on your records. Then we've got, let's see, you've got the manufacturer manager. The manufacturer manager lets you maintain the manufacturer table. And the manufacturer is a fairly simple record, a status, a type, company, standard industry classification code, product manager, the freight add rate. You could maintain it in here on a manufacturer basis instead of on an item number basis, less data entry. When the manufacturer was placed inactive and why, a manufacturer address, some code fields that let you track whatever you want, and our standard attributes. So that lets you set up your manufacturer table. Then you have pallet group management. Pallet group management is used when you have pricing that you sell based on pallets. Let's make it smaller. You can see here what we've done is we've set up a group with Gatorade. Where you can have these different items can be consolidated for pricing. If you buy a pallet of Gatorade, you can mix and match these different item numbers, and it will then accumulate the total number of items in a pallet group and then go through and reprice it. Because you may have only ordered 2 cases of blue Gatorade, but you get a price break at 48 cases. So if the sum of all the cases adds up to 48, the system then goes back and updates the price for the line with 2 cases to the 48 case discounted quantity. That's your pallet grouping. You can also do the same thing in product lines. And that's maintained elsewhere. I don't remember right now where that's maintained. But product lines allow you, in the case of batteries, to say use the cumulative number of batteries within a product line in order to price each of the individual items. So OFM could use that if you have respawn chairs where someone can buy multiple respawn chairs and you want to give them the price discount based on the total number of respawn chairs, even though they don't qualify for the price quantity discount based on each individual line. Okay. Let's see. Anything else in here that's... The other stuff has to deal with pricing, so we won't look at that. Let's see where else we have static information. We looked at buying groups. We have a separate ship to management here where you can manage all of your ship to addresses at once instead of just by customer. That's useful if you need to find a specific ship to address and then figure out what customer it belongs to. Okay. Okay, those are pretty, okay, let's go to Bin Master. That's the last one on the catalog. Bin Master management lets you manage the Bin Master records, which are the bin types. So this lets you say this bin has a class, a format, an access method. Access method is used if it's in a cage or if it's a very high bin that needs a special tall forklift to get to, any restrictions on it, what level it is in your pallet structure, a default, whether you delete the bin records when it's empty. This allows you to say, in this bin type, we only allow one item number in a bin. The default is you can have a bin, which may be a shelf location, and you can have more than one item number in that bin. This restricts it to only one item number. If you have this checked, then it only lets you use bins of this type if they're pre-set up. It won't let you create bins on the fly. You can have status defaults for these bins. This is an active bin. This is a bin that you don't commit inventory out of during the picking process, usually for damaged or restricted items. Then this is the bin a pallet a default, so that when you create a bin, it defaults properly, and then count information. Then you've got some size information for this bin type. What's the maximum weight? What's the depth, width, height, elevation, and then some code fields. So this lets you, if you have different bin categories in your warehouse, you may have a section where you store pallets, and these pallets are 4 or 5 levels high. This tells you that if you have stuff on the highest level, that your normal forklift won't pick it, and it has to be picked using a special forklift that's usually used for long-term storage or for bulk, that you bring it down and then move it to a consumption bin. It lets you specify that these bins can only take a certain weight, or you can only put certain volume of goods into them, and help you in a highly automated warehouse. So we've only got a couple of minutes left. Let's open the floor for any questions, any comments. If not, I thank you for your attendance, patience, and participation, or at least Mary, who asked some questions.
I did have one other question now. I thought about it. So is there a way to have a group, like we have e-commerce customers and then we have dealers, some, you know, mom and pop shops, and they can't buy the same things. So in the catalog management, is there a way to say, okay, category customer e-commerce, let's say, and category customer dealer, do you code it by item, I would think?
That's done with PACS, P-A-C-S. But the answer is yes, you can restrict customers to that they can only purchase different product lines. You can do it through the buying groups. Yeah, the system's been around 30 years, so